Welcome to the relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The good people over there at Fight Post have awarded Sky Nicholson Performance of the Year. The Fight Post Performance of the Year has to go to Sky Nicholson. It's the time for festive cheer, but it's also time for the obligatory end-of-the-year honors. The last 12 months have been difficult for women's boxing. Much of the momentum from previous years has been lost, waning in interest. Fights are incredibly hard to come by, but there is renewed hope that 2025 will be different.
I don't agree with that.
This year we saw Michaela Mayer versus Natasha Jonas, Michaela Mayer versus Sandy Ryan,
Sky Nicholson versus Raven Chapman, Taylor versus Serrano 2,
Fundoria versus Alanis, that ended in a highlight reel knockout. Now, I disagree. This was not a bad year for women in boxing.
Sinicia Estrada versus Yokasta Valle for Undisputed.
The article continues, despite the difficulties 2024 has still thrown up, there are a few little gems that we can celebrate. When dishing out these end-of-the-year awards, it's very easy to go with the obvious, but sometimes you have to shine a light elsewhere. Sky Nicholson has perhaps struggled to get the recognition that she deserves for her talent. Nicholson doesn't deliver the blood and thunder many demand. Her style is elusive and very much safety first. The southpaw could be in the realm of not being truly appreciated because she doesn't entertain enough. But boxing is still an art. The old line of hit and not get hit is often forgotten, but Sky Nicholson is a little reminder that there is another way. Nicholson went into her WBC World Featherweight title defense against the unbeaten Raven Chapman back in October, knowing it could be the hardest fight of her professional career to date. The pre-fight narrative was that Chapman would be her worst nightmare. The Australian might have to go to a very dark place in Riyadh, possibly the first professional fight where there was a real possibility that Nicholson might lose. I thought Chapman would definitely take rounds off Nicholson, but I questioned if she could win enough. That was pretty much how it played out. Chapman made a decent enough start, but it was a typical Sky Nicholson fight once Nicholson found her range and timing. That's not a critique, by the way. The British challenger couldn't get close enough to do any real damage. The odd punch found its target, but Nicholson always seemed a step or two in front of Chapman, and in truth, won going away, and with some degree of comfort. Nicholson won by scores of 98-92, 98-92, 99-91. You could maybe make a case for giving Chapman 3 rounds, but her opponent was just too good for her on the night. Chapman isn't a bad fighter by any stretch of the imagination, and she will undoubtedly come again, but Raven Chapman won't be the last fighter to find that they don't have all the pieces in their hand to solve the great Sky Nicholson puzzle. It was a perceived, extremely difficult fight on paper, but Nicholson made a hard fight look incredibly easy. That is a testament to the class of the Aussie.
And so on that premise, the people at Fight Post are giving Sky Performance of the Year. Here at Ring IQ, I would say that Performance of the Year has to go to Michaela Mayer. I get their reasoning for giving it to Sky Nicholson, but I remember ahead of the Mayer versus Ryan fight, there were a lot of people that felt Michaela just doesn't have the punching power or durability to pry the WBO title away from Sandy Ryan, who we all know is a fierce fighter. Big, strong girl. A lot of people thought Michaela was going to get knocked out. Michaela was in a bad way. She had already dropped a decision to Alicia Baumgartner, was robbed of a decision in Liverpool by Natasha Jonas.
This was very much a make-or-break fight for Michaela against a fighter who did stand a distinct possibility of stopping her. But Michaela endured, fought hard enough that she is now WBO welterweight champion. On that premise, I would give Performance of the Year to Michaela, but there is something to be said about Sky.
She does deserve her flowers. I was among the people that thought the Raven Chapman fight was going to be a difficult fight for Sky. I thought Sky was going to lose. She proved me wrong.
I'm not a fan of her base style, by the way. Pure boxers are just not my cup of tea. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that she's not a great boxer, that she's not talented and effective. She is.
She's good.
My thoughts on Sky Nicholson here at year's end is she's one of the fighters that stands a very good chance of becoming either the next face or one of the faces of women's boxing.
Katie Taylor's not going to be around forever. Neither will Amanda Serrano.
Clarissa, she doesn't fight often enough, and when she does fight, nobody knows who those girls are.
Sinicia Estrada retired.
Whereas Sky is young enough, fresh enough,
with the ability
Yes.
and charisma that she could become the face or one of the faces in the next era.
Swagger.
Because you have to get people talking about you. You have to be able to draw people in. And even though Sky doesn't have the most fan-friendly style, she does have a way of drawing people in. After that Raven Chapman fight, there are not a lot of girls in the featherweight division I think stand a chance. I can only name two off the top of my head. Maybe Elizabeth Oshoba of Nigeria, maybe her arch-nemesis from the amateurs.
Karis Archingstone.
Maybe Karis can give Sky a run for her money, but Sky is just so much further along now, I'm not even sure that if there is something to be said about Sky Nicholson here at year's end, it's that more and more she's becoming a face in the sport. Not just the belt holder, not just the girl with a belt. There are a lot of girls holding a lot of belts. At a lot of weights. Most of the time, people don't know who they are. There are a growing number of people that are familiar with Sky. So even if I'm not giving her performance of the year, that's what I can say about her. She's got that extra, that indefinable quality that helps a fighter become a star and cross over.
She's got it.
And super lightweight news. Bill Haney, the father of Devin Haney, had a few choice words for any and every one of Devin's detractors. He said, youngest undisputed, 2-division champion in boxing, 2023 manager of the year, we changed the game and you can't take it at all.
Changed the game? What did they change?
That's one of those things you hear people say that has no substance and no meaning to it. They changed the game. What did they change about the game? Bill continued, gotta stay focused and keep shooting to get where we're at. Can't be scared. Fear don't win rounds. Fear don't hit buzzer beaters. Fear don't get promotions. Winners lock in. Stay focused. Never stop shooting, ever. You gotta be aware of the clowns who can't get or keep a woman, but always have the most to say. Post or comment.
Is this about the whole Lena Sayed and Young Thug thing?
It is. Devin Haney fell for the same trap that so many young athletes fall for.
Doesn't matter what Bill has to say about it.
Your son is no different than any of these other young athletes that want to swap fluids with the same cum buckets as everybody else, and worse. Your son got her pregnant. Did you not teach him anything?
She hit the lottery.
Bill continued, stay mad. I raised a 2-division undisputed champion, period. Y'all can keep creating content, lying in the comments while your kids stay mad they were raised by a jealous sucker.
Devin is the sucker, Bill.
Now, Bill Haney might be a street person, he might be, but his son isn't. So when this year started, Devin Haney started it off on a high. He was coming off that lopsided decision win over Regis Prograis. He had just become a 2-division champion, and over the course of 12 months, his stock dramatically plummeted. It wasn't just losing to Ryan Garcia the way that he did in a fight that he was so favored to win. It's the lawsuit afterwards and the optics of that.
Suing a fellow boxer for assault and battery in association with a boxing match?
Not using the time to squeeze in another fight before this year is out, because the fight with Ryan wasn't that back there in April. You had plenty of time to squeeze in one more fight and put distance between yourself and that performance. You didn't.
And now this.
Fidelity issues with the missus in association with rapper Young Thug.
Young shit.
Young Cumrag.
Cum bucket.
No, I will never understand how so many young athletes, as soon as they get a little bit of money, fall for the same trap in spite of how many cautionary tales are out there. I'll never understand it.
It's not that you can't have your fun with Lena Sayed or any of these other Instagram models. Come on her face, come on her back.
Do what you want, but you don't have a kid by a broad like that, and you certainly don't marry her.
Hand over all your power, why don't you?
If he did in fact marry her, you just don't end up in a situation like that one unless you're making a commitment to a woman like that, unless you're a sucker. And that's what Devin Haney is. He's a sucker.
He's a mark.
Bill can't make his decisions for him. Devin is a grown man, free to make his own decisions. And he so has, attaching himself to a parasitic entity.
That's what these broads are.
It's pulling the kind of broads you probably couldn't pull before until the money came in. That validates him, makes him feel seen.
You can never get a woman like that off of your own charm, your own charisma.
Maybe nobody can, because a woman like that is after one thing and one thing only. For all of Bill's talk of Devin being the youngest undisputed champion, he doesn't get the respect you would expect one to get. He's not viewed in the same light as, say, an Oleksandr Usyk or a Terrence Crawford and all Inoue.
No.
Not all undisputed runs are created equal. You shouldn't need me to say that. Some runs are difficult than others. In terms of difficulty, I would say Usyk's runs have been the most difficult, whether it's the one at heavyweight against naturally bigger men or cruiserweight as the away fighter in every title fight. Usyk's was the most difficult, Devin's was the least. The least difficult, the easiest one among all the undisputed runs we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years. All he really had to do was fight one guy.
George.
I give Devin his flowers for doing it, by the way, for going to Australia and making that commitment and believing in his boxing. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that that was just as difficult as what Usyk did or Crawford or Inoue. It wasn't. It was one guy.
So maybe that's why he's not as respected as you would expect an undisputed champion to be.
Because not all undisputed runs are created equal, and we know that.
It's a common sense argument, but common sense is often what's neglected in these discussions.
Best way to describe Devin Haney's boxing career: very successful and accomplished for one so young.
But pump the brakes. You say he changed the game by doing what?
What did he change about the sport of boxing? What, because he has his promoter's license? There are any number of boxers that have a promoter's license. What, because he's a free agent?
He's not the only one.
And he needs to work a bit harder in the coming year to raise his stock, because right now, it's at an all-time low, whether Bill wants to acknowledge that or not. Over to the heavyweight division, where the Americans, at least some of them, are still trying to gatekeep what it takes to make a fighter an all-time great. A user that goes by the name Osis201 said, he's not an all-time great for sure. His resume is not deep at all, just stop it.
I know what that is.
He needs to beat like 10 more heavyweights to be considered.
You mean that he should pad his record and fill it full of fluff, like Deontay Wilder did for 7 or 8 years, before actually fighting for a title? You mean like that because that's what Americans are used to. They're used to the fluff.
Another user that goes by the name Last of a Dying Breed said, as far as folks praising Loma over Usyk, you're going off accomplishments, but fans are going off of their eye tests.
No, I'm going off of facts and stats, and you're going off of feelings.
What they are seeing, just like a real pound-for-pound list, Loma looks better in the ring than almost anybody.
Looks better to who?
How he looks, and whether or not it's better than somebody else is all a matter of opinion, which changes from person to person. What's not a matter of opinion is that Usyk has fought more champions than Lomachenko, beat more champions than Lomachenko, and he's done what Lomachenko never did at any weight. He's 2-time undisputed.
That's a fact. All that shit you're talking about is opinions.
Another user that goes by the name Online Safety said, if an era has nothing but mediocre boxers in the higher weights, except for one very good boxer who dominates, does this make the good boxer an all-time great?
Who said they're mediocre?
That boxer would be a great of his era because all-time greatness is a function of the talent pool. The sad reality is it is impossible to assess whether Usyk could be an all-time great because the heavyweight talent pool has been the weakest since records began.
Yeah, I don't believe any of that shit. What I believe is that if Usyk were American, you wouldn't be writing me these lengthy paragraphs of bullshit.
How do you know?
Look at what he finished off with. If Andre Ward came out of retirement because you think Andre Ward is better than Usyk?
That's a goddamn joke. And here's another one. A guy who goes by the name Triple H 1200 said, actually, the strongest part of Usyk is the con artist in him. Hit with 3 body shots in 3 different fights and somehow cons his way out of a 10 count versus having to fight on like Maidana did versus Khan. But we can continue to pretend those incidents didn't happen. Another con man boxer.
More like another con man comment. I know this Triple H guy. I see the stupid shit he posts all the time. Who do you think he picked to win the Fury fight?
Just guess. And what kind of fighters do you think he's a fan of? Because last I checked, this guy's a huge Demetrius Andrade fan, to the point he regularly trashes Canelo in favor of Demetrius.
I didn't forget.
See, what the Americans aren't used to is the no-nonsense boxer that doesn't need the fluff, that doesn't need 5 or 6 no-hopers in between the meaningful fights.
This is not about boxing for Triple H. This is about nationalism. This is about flags. This is about race. Because I guarantee you, if Usyk were from America and he looked like Triple H, he wouldn't be saying any of that shit.
Don't you see what the common denominators with Usyk's critics are? It's very obvious. Another user that goes by the name Antonio Mosley said, George Foreman had a much bigger frame than Usyk when Foreman faced Norton, but weighed the same and same height, but Foreman was the much bigger man.
Who the hell was debating who's bigger, Usyk or Foreman?
Foreman also knocked out big and small men with grazing punches. Foreman, just like Ali, cut weight.
This is what these guys do. They create an entirely different argument based on things no one said because they can't address what you did say.
Foreman, in his book, said trainer Dick Sadler would make him cut weight down to 220, if not 215. His walking weight was about 250 or more. Usyk isn't that big.
And when was the debate Usyk being bigger than Foreman or Ali? I said in that era, the heavyweights were smaller, and Usyk wouldn't be a little guy in that era.
The median height for a heavyweight today is anywhere in between 6'3" to 6'8". Whether you're talking about Daniel Dubois, Anthony Joshua, Philippe Pergovic, Zhilei Zhang, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, the heavyweights today are a lot bigger.
That's obvious.
Antonio Mosley continued, Muhammad Ali was the same thing. He stated he would come in at 230 to bully his opponents, and this isn't the era of the giants. Most of the heavyweights now are like 6'3" at most.
That's bullshit.
For example, Dillian White is listed as 6'4". In reality, he's 6'2". Same with Ortiz.
That's more bullshit.
Anthony Joshua is around 6'5", not 6'6". Fury is around 7'7". He's been around 6'9" men that dwarf him. Yeah, that's all bullshit. That's all bullshit. Because if you look at the top 10 ranked standings of the Ali era, or the Larry Holmes era, the Tyson era, there were very, very few men standing in over 6'3", 6'4".
What the hell is this guy talking about?
Dwight Muhammad Qawi stood in at about 5'6".
Mike Tyson stood in at about 5'10", even though some people will tell you he's shorter than that. He's more like 5'9".
Do you see a lot of 5'6" or 5'9" heavyweights running around in this era? Look at the top 10 ranked standings. What's the median height of a heavyweight in the top 10 or the top 15? Play these stupid games by yourself.
See, that's why the American boxing fan doesn't have a voice anymore, because whenever they say something, it's usually stupid.
You want to sit here and have an argument with me that today's heavyweights aren't bigger than yesterday's.
That's all these guys do, is argue in circles and waste everybody's time.
The original point was that where 6'3" is not that big for a heavyweight today, back then, that would have been a decent-sized heavyweight, because Ali was 6'3", and so was George Foreman. This avalanche of bullshit from Antonio is intended to be a response.
They feel threatened, because Americans don't rule boxing anymore.
Even though that's been obvious at heavyweight for at least the last 15, 20 years.
You thought you had something in Deontay Wilder, whose record consists of a lot of fluff.
He starts getting beat by every halfway decent fighter they put him in there with, whether it's Tyson Fury or Joseph Parker or Zhilei Zhang. Land of the fragile egos.
Usyk is an all-time great. He's an all-time great fighter. Whether or not he's an all-time great heavyweight, that's a different conversation. Then again, it's a conversation I was never having.
It's kind of like how Floyd Mayweather is an all-time great, but I wouldn't say he's an all-time great welterweight. The Americans wish to deny Usyk his plaudits because they don't produce fighters like Usyk anymore, and that's the truth. Fighters like Usyk in America are a scarcity, so they're just gatekeeping the past.
Doing a piss-poor job of that, these would-be historians.
Everything you know about previous eras of boxing, you had to look up on YouTube and Google. I watched it. I saw it. I was there. That's how I know that the median height for a heavyweight yesterday was a lot smaller than it is today.
You don't know shit about boxing, and you don't fool me.